What will happen to Donald Trump if MTG and Boebert defy him on Epstein files? What happens when Donald Trump's grip on his most loyal allies begins to crack? That's exactly the question now swirling in Washington as reports suggest Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert may be ready to defy him over the explosive Epstein files. For years, Trump has relied on these firebrand members of Congress to amplify his message and shield him from accountability. But if they choose transparency over loyalty, it could mark a stunning shift in the balance of power within the MAGA movement. Will their rebellion open the door to long-buried truths and weaken Trump's influence just when he needs it most? Stay tuned as we break it down right now. The controversy surrounding the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files has recently taken an unexpected turn. For years, discussions about these documents have remained politically charged with allegations of cover-ups, secrecy, and partisan maneuvering. Donald Trump, the former president and current candidate for re-election, has repeatedly referred to the matter as a Democrat hoax. Yet what is striking now is that two of his most consistent allies, Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, have broken ranks. Both have joined a bipartisan push for transparency, insisting that the Department of Justice release all Epstein-related files. This development raises several critical questions. How does this shift affect Trump's political standing? What are the legal, institutional, and electoral implications if members of his own party move against his position? And perhaps most importantly, how does this reshape the broader Republican narrative heading into a high-stakes election cycle? This script will examine the situation in detail, offering a professional, nonpartisan analysis of what may unfold. Jeffrey Epstein, convicted for sex crimes involving minors, died in 2019 under circumstances that continue to attract controversy. His connections to numerous influential figures across politics, finance, and entertainment have fueled demands for full transparency. The Epstein files, understood as records from investigations, court proceedings, financial disclosures, and personal communications, potentially implicate powerful individuals both in the United States and abroad. For the Department of Justice, the question of whether to release these files involves balancing the public's right to know against privacy laws, ongoing investigations, and national security considerations. For politicians, however, the files represent something more, a litmus test of their commitment to justice, transparency, and accountability. Donald Trump has consistently sought to frame the controversy as a politically motivated fabrication. His rhetoric positions the issue as an attempt by Democrats and the media to undermine him and his allies. Until recently, many members of his political base accepted this framing. That consensus is now fractured. Representatives Greene and Boebert have long been associated with the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. Their political fortunes have often been tied to loyalty toward Trump, both in defending him from investigations and in amplifying his narratives. Their decision to co-sponsor the Epstein Files Transparency Act, a bipartisan effort compelling the release of these documents, marks a significant departure. Publicly, Greene and Boebert have argued that Epstein's crimes were real and horrific and therefore cannot be dismissed as a hoax. They emphasize the rights of survivors and frame the disclosure as a moral obligation. In their words, the real hostile act was the abuse committed against minors, not the demand for transparency. This framing places them in direct conflict with Trump's position. It signals that loyalty to the former president may no longer override other political imperatives, particularly on issues where public sentiment strongly favors disclosure. There are several reasons why the defiance of Greene and Boebert is significant. First, it disrupts Trump's narrative control. For years, Trump has maintained cohesion within his party by casting dissent as betrayal. Yet here, two of his own high-profile allies are openly rejecting his stance. That reduces his ability to claim unanimous support from his movement. Second, it reshapes public perception. When figures strongly identified with Trumpism align with Democrats, it weakens the claim that calls for transparency are purely partisan. The issue becomes reframed as bipartisan, even nonpartisan, and centered on victims' rights rather than party politics. Third, it introduces electoral risk. Greene and Boebert have significant followings among Republican voters. Their willingness to diverge from Trump may embolden others within the party to do the same. If more Republicans support the discharge petition to force a vote on releasing the files, Trump could face an intra-party split on a highly sensitive issue. From a legal perspective, the push for transparency raises complex questions. Many of the documents are sealed under protective orders, confidentiality agreements, or national security restrictions. For the Department of Justice, any release must comply with statutory requirements. For Congress, the power lies in political pressure and legislative mandates. If Greene and Boebert succeed in mobilizing bipartisan support, Congress could force the DOJ's hand. That would establish a precedent of legislative intervention in sensitive investigative files. It would also set a new standard for transparency in cases involving public figures and systemic abuse. For Trump, the institutional implications are profound. He has positioned himself as a protector of secrecy on this issue. If Congress overrides his stance, it will demonstrate that his influence no longer guarantees compliance within the legislative branch. The risks Trump faces can be divided into several categories. First, reputational risk. By continuing to call the matter a hoax, Trump risks appearing dismissive of victims. This stance may erode support among moderate voters who prioritize justice and accountability. Second, association risk. Trump's past connections to Epstein, whether social interactions or documented appearances at events, create a backdrop that magnifies public scrutiny. Even without legal implications, the optics are damaging if he is perceived as opposing transparency. Third, intra-party risk. Greene and Boebert's defiance may encourage others within the GOP to prioritize independence over loyalty. Should more Republicans follow suit, Trump could face diminished authority within his own coalition. Fourth, electoral risk. The 2024 campaign environment is already complex, with multiple investigations and trials involving Trump. Adding internal divisions over the Epstein files could weaken his ability to present a united front against Democrats. The Republican Party has long faced internal tension between Trump-aligned figures and those seeking a more traditional conservative path. The Epstein files controversy highlights those divisions. By siding with Democrats, Greene and Boebert demonstrate that there are limits to Trump's influence. This creates space for other Republicans to carve out independent identities, potentially broadening the party's appeal to moderates. At the same time, it risks alienating Trump's base, who may interpret such moves as betrayal. For GOP leadership, the situation is delicate. Supporting transparency aligns with public sentiment, but risks confrontation with Trump. Opposing transparency may satisfy Trump loyalists, but exposes the party to accusations of covering up abuse. At the heart of this issue are the survivors of Epstein's crimes. Their testimonies emphasize that the controversy is not abstract or partisan, but rooted in real harm suffered by real people. Calls for transparency have grown louder, particularly after press conferences where survivors directly address Congress. Public opinion strongly favors the release of the files. Polling data indicates that a majority of Americans, across party lines, support full disclosure. In this environment, political leaders who oppose transparency risk appearing indifferent to justice. For Trump, this is a difficult position. His insistence on dismissing the matter as a hoax runs counter to widespread public expectations. Greene and Boebert's decision to side with survivors aligns them with public opinion, enhancing their credibility while isolating Trump. Several scenarios could unfold depending on how events progress. One possibility is limited defiance. Greene and Boebert may remain isolated, with few others joining their call. In this scenario, Trump retains control over the broader narrative, though his credibility takes a minor hit. Another possibility is expanding defiance. If additional Republicans sign on to the discharge petition, the bill could reach the required 218 signatures, forcing a floor vote. This would significantly weaken Trump's position and could lead to eventual release of the files. A third scenario involves full disclosure. If Congress succeeds and the DOJ releases the files, the political consequences will depend on the contents. Should the files implicate high-profile figures across parties, the fallout would reshape American politics for years. Finally, there is the scenario of stalemate. Legal challenges, national security considerations, or executive resistance could delay or block release. This would prolong uncertainty, keeping the issue alive during the election cycle. The Epstein files controversy intersects with the 2024 election in several ways. First, it affects Trump's messaging. His campaign emphasizes loyalty, strength, and victimhood in the face of political persecution. Defiance from Greene and Boebert undermines that narrative by showing that even close allies reject his stance. Second, it influences voter perceptions of transparency and accountability. Candidates who support disclosure may benefit from aligning with public sentiment, while those who oppose it risk backlash. Third, it may shape media coverage. The story combines elements of scandal, bipartisanship, and survivor advocacy, ensuring sustained attention. For Trump, that means the issue could remain prominent throughout the campaign. Finally, it could impact donor dynamics. Wealthy individuals potentially implicated in the files may seek to influence the political process. The revelation that a major GOP donor appears in Epstein's contacts illustrates how financial networks intersect with political decisions. Defying Trump carries both risks and rewards for Greene and Boebert. On one hand, they may face backlash from Trump loyalists and risk losing support within the MAGA movement. Trump has historically retaliated against perceived disloyalty, often through public criticism or by supporting primary challengers. On the other hand, their stance may broaden their appeal. By prioritizing justice and aligning with public sentiment, they could strengthen their credibility with moderates and independents. This may prove valuable in future electoral contests, particularly as demographics shift in their districts. The defiance of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert on the Epstein files represents a pivotal moment in American politics. For Donald Trump, it introduces new challenges to his authority, reputation, and electoral prospects. For Congress, it raises fundamental questions about transparency, accountability, and the balance between secrecy and public trust. Whether this moment becomes a turning point depends on how the broader GOP responds and whether the discharge petition succeeds. What is clear is that the demand for justice from survivors and the public will continue to shape the debate. In a political climate where loyalty has often defined the Republican Party's relationship with Trump, Greene and Boebert's decision shows that even the strongest alliances have limits. The coming months will reveal whether this is an isolated act of defiance or the beginning of a broader realignment.